Okay, picture this. The lunch rush is underway at an IHOP in San Antonio. People are tucking into plates full of fried eggs and bacon, fluffy flapjacks, and at least three types of pancake syrup. Your name is Elijah Arnold, and you are a 22-year-old black belt. It's your second week working, and you've just made enough money to buy some tires for your car. This place means something to you. You hear some popping and you look at the register to see a man trying to open it and steal some cash. But you move on instinct and rush the attempted robber. He raises a crowbar and hits you in the face. Hi, hello, and welcome to another episode of True Crime Culinary, where we look at crime, food, history, and the strange events that connect them. For those of you in the Estados Unidos, Father's Day is coming up. It's the third Sunday in every June. This year it's the 21st. And it got me thinking. So a little bit about me. I grew up in a blended family. Pre-blend, my parents were single parents. Single parents, y'all got your work cut out for you. My mom is a chef. At the time, she was in culinary school. And my dad is an extroverted engineer. So if you've ever spent 6 seconds with an engineer, you know they love a bit of structure, repetition, and consistency. My father, no diff. Thus, when we were at his house, my siblings and I survived off of 6 basic food groups that combined, in his mind, the logical blocks of carbohydrates, protein, and vitamins. Your foundational blocks for creating humans that will survive to adulthood. What are those 6 basic food groups, you ask? Pasta, pot stickers, pizza, smoothies, omelets. And relevant for our story today, pancakes. Which got me thinking, where do pancakes even come from? So in honor of Father's Day, let's talk about our flat friends. So grab yourself a pan and let's get cakey. When most people think of ancient foods, they probably picture bread. Mayhaps a hunter in the wild, chasing a deer, or like a moose or something. Because while pancakes may have a universal appeal, don't you need a fire, a flat surface, and ideally a delicious topping? Thus, they must be a recent trend, no? No, in fact they are not. History says nay, nay. I find myself rather surprised to find that archaeologists have found evidence that humans were grinding wild plants and starches roughly 30,000 years ago. That's many more thousands than I thought. How do they know this? We have evidence of grinding stones, starch residues, and flour-like processing situations. So evidence does actually suggest that people may have been making something similar, looking like as close as possible to a pancake, or at least closer to a pancake than a loaf of bread way back when. And if you're like me and you're like, wait a second, what were people doing like 30,000 years ago? I have a few time markers for you. We'll start with my favorite. Woolly mammoths, yes, still kicking. Fire, absolutely flaming. Cave bears, alarmingly large and yes, present. Metal tools? No. Wheels? Also no. Cave art? Absolutely. So our distant friends likely followed a simple process. They would gather seeds, roots, or grains, grind them into a coarse flour with a rock in like a hole or something, and then mix it with water. Cook? Maybe more like make it really hot, and maybe dry on a heated stone to make it more palatable, which means pancakes, theoretically, archaeologically, connecting some dots here, maybe it could be one of our oldest foods, which is super cool. But apart from our woolly mammoth hunting friends, time progresses. And similar to other stories like the macaroni story from last week, the grains that grow naturally in an area help influence what people make with it. Super logical. And that's because whatever grain is growing kind of reflects how much water there is, what other ingredients are available, how fine can you make that grain once you pummel it with some stones. The region might also tell you what you pair with, in this case, pancakes. So, pancake-like food started appearing all over the world. In France, we have crepes, if you will. In Russia, we have a blini. In Ethiopia, injera. Which, by the way, I am completely obsessed with injera. I went to an Ethiopian restaurant a few weeks back in Oakland, and I cannot get enough of injera. It's my favorite. I apologize in advance for my pronunciation. In Korea, hotok. In China, scallion pancakes. The details are going to vary. You're going to get sweet, savory, paper thin, thick and chewy. But the basic idea remains pretty consistent. You take a grain, you make it small, you turn it into a batter or dough, cook it on a hot surface, enjoy. And you know what's really cool? Humans, they love a party. So pancakes aren't just everyday food. they have picked up traditions along the way. In England, Shrove Tuesday became known as Pancake Day. The idea was to use up ingredients like eggs, butter, and milk before Lent began. Some towns even developed pancake races, which have been going on for hundreds of years, close to 600 years. Depending on the city or the location, you might have an older or a newer sort of festival. For example, I found the Spitalfield race in London, where, according to the YouTube video, looked super fun. Everybody dresses up in costumes and face paint, and the idea is that you either, I think individually or in groups, race back and forth with a pan that has a pancake on it, and periodically you have to flip the pancake. So you're running and trying not to drop the pancake, and then you also have to flip it and not drop it. And if you do drop it, I think you just pick it up and keep running with it, but it looked very funny and apropos for all age groups. Also, sidebar, flapjack I think means like a oat bar in Britain, but it means pancake in the US. So if you ever hear that, that's why. Moving on from England, Russia has, I'm going to struggle with this word, Maslenitsa, which has roots that predate Christianity. So think of thousands of years. It also is the week before Lent and is known as Pancake Week. It signifies a changing of the seasons, and they have these like ginormous bonfires, and I think they're themed every year. So the video I saw, I forgot what it was, but it's basically like a castle out of wood, this humongous bonfire, and everybody's just around there and like really happy. It looked so cool. The blini, or the pancake of the region, is a symbol of the sun. The celebration kind of signifies the changing of the seasons, which is why you eat the pancakes that represent the sun. But then later in time, it kind of also became this like pre-Lent thing. So there's a lot of mixing and matching. Just like in Russia, in France, you have something similar, La Chandelure. And I am not gonna act like that was perfect pronunciation, but that's not why you're listening to this show. Here, similar to Russia, there's kind of mixes of pagan and Christian influences, but most importantly, they make a 17-layer cake made out of crepes. I think it's 17, definitely in the teens, and between each layer, I think there's a little bit of cream. Super delish. Want. There are, of course, a million other ways that people celebrate pancakes, but I was blissfully, get it, unaware of these festivals, so I wanted to share them. Now, if you were to Google basically any pancake outside of the US of A, you'd notice they are pretty flat and almost look watertight. They're flexible and delicious, having grown up eating them all the time in Germany, but they're definitely a different texture than the ones you'd find in like IHOP. And that's because American pancakes use chemical leavening. So let's have Alfred Bird enter the chat. In the 1800s, English chemist Alfred Bird was trying to solve a practical problem. One might say also a romantic problem. His wife couldn't tolerate yeast, which is a leavening agent. A leavening agent is something that helps create lift and make things fluffier. So Bird, undeterred, began experimenting with alternative ways to create lift in baked goods. May I just say, green flags all day. Like the definition of if they can, they will. So here's what happened, because it's getting a little chemistry-like. What is baking powder? Baking powder is all about releasing carbon dioxide, aka bubbles, to make what we see as fluffy in our pancakes or baked goods. So Bird figured out version 1, which is baking soda, a base, plus an acid, which when wet would start to react and go boom with bubbles. Think of like your early chemistry sets or your assignments in chemistry where you had to make a volcano and you would put together some sort of vinegar and baking soda. Maybe you put in some food dye. But now we have two problems, right? First off, Bird is not American, and I mentioned that Americans have fluffier pancakes. I will get there in a moment. Number 2, famously, baking is a very precise activity, and having lava as your batter is a real downer. This is where our dude, Eben Norton Horsford, I hope I said his name correctly, of Harvard in the United States, enters the chat as well. Him and I'm sure a few other chemists, but he's the one that I saw mentioned. He figures out how to make double-acting baking powder. Basically, at the very simplest level, him and again, I'm sure a bunch of dudes in lab coats, figured out that if they mix in cornstarch, they can keep the ingredients dry because it's acid, base, and also liquid. That's what helps create the reaction. So by adding cornstarch, they're keeping ingredients dry, preventing premature reaction, and then also improving storage. Also, the double-acting baking powder actually has two acids that react with the bases. One that reacts when it's wet, and then one that reacts when it's hot, aka when it hits heat, whether that's in the oven or on the stove. So because he was in the United States and he got a patent, it's opened up this whole other category of baking. So if you see recipes that say soda bread or quick breads, they're usually using baking soda or baking powder because everything happens fast. Usually yeast needs a second to vibe, reproduce. It doesn't like to be rushed. But baking soda or baking powder, as I mentioned, is a chemical reaction, and it starts as soon as liquid is involved. But may I just say, hello, a chemistry love story? And also, guys, it grows with heat. Maybe like his love for his wife. I actually want to know what her reaction was. Like, did she say, oh my God, that is so cool that you made me this? I hope she did. That's like, that's so sweet. I can't get over that. Anyway, our lovebird and the follow-ups weren't trying to actually reinvent pancakes. They were just trying to solve a practical problem, but it did transform a lot of baking. Thus, tall, fluffy American pancakes, many of us recognize today, owe a lot to the developments in 19th century baking. Yay, science! But let's do a U-turn back to IHOP. Because also, where did IHOP come from? In 1958, the first International House of Pancakes opened in California. I didn't know it was California. Yay! I think it was 4 dudes who started it, but the idea was pretty straightforward. You build a restaurant around breakfast, and at the time, pancakes are familiar, inexpensive, and easy to customize. You've got fruit toppings, whipped cream, different syrups, different batters, eggs, bacon, what's there not to love? And then over time, IHOP expanded across the country and became one of the most recognizable breakfast chains in America. Which brings us back to Elijah. He's just been hit in the face by a crowbar. But he says, not today, friend, and pins down the assailant until the police arrive because, again, he is a black belt. Crowbar guy is arrested, Elijah gets a solid pat on the back, and all is well. I was kind of like, hey, wait, like, he literally just basically put his life on the line. Does he get anything for it besides a pat on the back? Because also, while you're seeing interviews with Elijah, he's literally got a Band-Aid over his nose. He's got a man bun. Got to keep it high and tight. He's still wearing his IHOP kit that is covered in blood. And he's just like casually talking about putting his life on the line for a register, which like, love that for him. But let me just say, we don't have to do that. That's why insurance exists. I mean, like the gist of it is that he says this really meant a lot to me. And I guess the person who was trying to steal was kind of like, hey, I'm in a rough patch. Like, why won't you let me walk away with this money? And Elijah's sitting there going like, I've made some really bad decisions too. I'm dealing with that. I'm literally living out of my car. I just got my job 2 weeks ago. Like, no, you don't get to just like come in here and take money. So I think he got a kindness award of like $1,000, which is great. $1,000 is a lot of money. And I just hope he's doing well because he seems like a cool guy. So this weekend, whether you're making pancakes for your dad, your stepdad, your baby daddy, or just yourself, remember, you're eating a food that may be just about 30,000 years old. If you like them fluffy, you can thank a chemist trying to help his wife. And remember, if your pancakes do come out flat, that's not a mistake. It's just historical accuracy. Until next time, stay curious and be careful what's in your cup. Check out our show notes for sources, hit that subscribe button, rate and review the podcast anywhere you listen.